Our female has her eye on your house. Move out now. This will be our home from now on. I looked at these two beastmen. These beastmen looked strange. They were all beastmen of the Blackwater Wolf clan. Whitey stood in front of me, telling me not to be afraid. This orc pushed by D directly. Hurry up and go. You should be honored that our females fancy your house. By D definitely refused. The only thing that can make me back down unconditionally is to slow down. Hearing this, the beastman immediately raised his hand and attacked by D. What? How dare you refuse the female's request? You don't know how to die. By D raised his hand to meet the battle. Radiating light, he directly squeezed the beastman's hand and then twisted it, only to hear a click. The orc's hand was broken and flung him towards his companion, falling to the ground and screaming in pain. My arm! White Emperor only said one word. Get lost! The two men defied him. You wait! Then staggered out of here, screaming in agony as they left. Pactai loaded the door. The wolf tribe may be in chaos these days. Try not to go out alone to avoid danger. I realize the danger too. It seems that the beasts of the Blackwater Wolf tribe don't come here to be guests. Plundering is their purpose. I don't know what else they will do in this cold season. These two came to the mate here and called out Li Wei's name. She also noticed this side. What's going on? I told you guys to find a room near Frost Cloud. Why did you come back in this condition? The two orcs also explained. Livy, that guy not only refused to give us a room, he even hit us. Livy's face immediately sank. How dare a male refuse my request? I am the most beautiful female of all the tribes along the Blackwater River. I have always been held in the palm of my hand and pampered. No one has ever refused me. Let's go. Let's go and see. Where's the male who has the guts to refuse me? Livy came here with her boys. She told her boys to open the door and they came down. I heard a bang inside and looked over. All of them came in. They were females. I looked at them nervously. Why are you trespassing in other people's homes? Get out! Li Wei looked at me. There was a female in the house. If I had known there was a female living there, I wouldn't have come to take over the house. Why is her skin so white and her hair so smooth? How come her waist is so slim? Better looking than me. Unforgivable. This orc is also looking fascinated. Li Wei pointed at Lin slowly. Where did you come out of the wild female? I'm looking dumbfounded here. He continued, I am now ordering you to get out of here as the mate of the wolf clan leader. You are not welcome in the wolf tribe. I immediately rebutted him. I've never seen you before. You must be a female of the Blackwater Wolf clan. This is the Rocky Mountain. Even if you are the mate of the Blackwater Wolf clan chief. U.S. This woman had a smug look on her face. Who said I'm the mate of the Blackwater clan chief? I'm the mate of the Rock clan chief. I'm the mistress of this place. I can't believe it. When did Frosty Cloud have a mate? I don't care whose mate you are. Behind me Bai D walked in. This is my home and Slow's home. Now get out of here or I'll be rude to you. I stepped forward and approached Bai D. You're back. Then whispered in his ear. She said she's Frosty Cloud's mate. You know. Just after that, this Li Wei explained. Just today, I have my eye on him. He must be my mate. So it's all your wishful thinking. I told you. Frost Cloud's temperament that bares his teeth when he sees a female. How can he accept a female as his mate? When Li Wei heard what I said, she was furious. You wild female! Who are you calling wishful thinking? It's an honor for Frost Cloud to have me as his mate. Unfortunately, Frostbite, who had just come in, heard all of this. Who do you think should kneel down in gratitude? At that sound, Li Wei seemed to sense something was wrong. She turned her head and looked over, and the others hurriedly dispersed. Livia took off her cloak. No male can resist my charm. In Frost Cloud's eyes, this female was exactly the same as the females he had met before. Selfish, greedy, cruel and ruthless, with a high opinion of herself, always thinking that the world revolved. Frost Cloud was the strongest orc in the Rocky Mountains of his generation. I will take him as my 30th mate. Li Wei moved closer to Frost Cloud and rubbed against his chest. His eyes changed. No orc could resist my temptation. You were here to help me out. I directly covered my eyes, not daring to look. Li Wei continued. I knew you've always cared about people. Frosty Cloud immediately became impatient and her eyes blazed up. Push away this female beast man, she screamed miserably. He wiped his hand. If you touch me again I'll cut off your hand. Crowds of people surrounded by the face of surprise. Hands cover the mouth exclaimed, looking at the ground lying constantly shivering green-haired woman. I cannot help but sigh. really worthy of the frost cloud. The orc whirled a big strange man. The woman sitting on the ground in a state of distress said angrily, "Is he still a male or not? How dare he do this to her?" But the man, just pale face, said he is not male. Only his mate is entitled to know. Just see his face is not good, said, frowned tightly, told her as far as possible to get as far away as possible. See her feel sick to the stomach. The woman eventually couldn't hold back her tears, angrily aggravated. No one could bully her like that, warning him that he would regret it. She cried and turned to leave, running away. The people behind her followed with nervousness and worry, but Frosty Cloud heard this and just turned his head to reprimand me, being bullied to the doorstep and still do not know how to fight back. Hearing this, I looked at him speechlessly. I simply did not have time to counterattack. He had already come. There is no need for me to play He was blocked, speechless. Thinking of the previous is to hear his side of the accident, panicked and ran here. He explained that he just happened to be passing by and saw it. I didn't expose him. I gave him face to drink. I also guessed so. But he still blushed red with shame and cursed loudly at the stupid female. To cover himself up, he grunted and turned to leave. I was very puzzled. This guy, how to say flip-flop on the flip-flop. Silver long hair man surface catering to do not know. But the heart-glad slow did not find his mind. Afterwards, the man is ready to strengthen this wooden door a bit. But just a few minutes later it was repaired. I looked at the broken wooden door in front of me, thinking that this door is useless for the orcs. If only we could get an iron door next time. I suddenly woke up and thought, I don't realize that I'm getting used to this place. I haven't thought about going back for a long time, and I'm sure this will happen again. I frowned and thought about it, but the man behind me was afraid of catching a cold, so he thoughtfully put a coat on me and reassured me that I shouldn't be afraid. He even reassured me that I shouldn't be afraid, and promised me that if anyone dared to do this to me again, he would never let them go. I was touched that he was worried about me, and only responded that I was fine, and that I wouldn't be afraid if he was there. I settled my heart. I feel safe in this world with Bai Di and me together. On the other side, sobbing came from the cave. The man saw her crying and took food to comfort her, saying, "Don't cry, eat some jerky." But the woman didn't appreciate it and fiercely kicked him away and told him to get lost. She sat with one hand clenched in her fist and tears in her eyes, accusing them of not protecting her and watching her being bullied. They could only advise that they couldn't afford to mess with her, and that they had to use other people's places to hide from the cold. But she simply could not listen to these. Only brainless delusion. If Cold Cloud is her partner, all this is not the natural course of events. The woman kept kicking and hitting him, disliking his uselessness. He cried and pulled her legs, just begging not to abandon him. The woman gritted her teeth in anger. She can't even look at these orcs, and is even prepared to find another way to get me killed. Outside the cave, the snow was drifting heavily. With the arrival of the cold wind, the forest has officially entered the winter. I thought happily that winter is here. It's the right time to eat hot pot. I prepared the seasoning, the meat and the pot. Soon the pot was gurgling with meat and the aroma was overpowering. I told Whitey to go to the cellar and get some vegetables to put in the hot pot. I stood in front of the pot, staring at the steaming hot pot in front of me, wondering if the atmosphere wasn't good enough for this meal, and wanting to call for more people. When I was about to call Frosty Cloud, I opened the door and found that Frost Cloud was talking to two people whose faces I couldn't see, and one of them, a male orc, seemed to have spotted me. The man licked his lips and had bad intentions. To my horror, I realized that the man had seen me, and the look in his eyes sent a chill down my spine. The green-eyed man noticed and warned him to keep his hands off me. Otherwise, don't blame him for being rude to him. The man was defiant and was about to retaliate, but the man behind him pulled him back just in time, telling him not to make trouble. This is not their territory. The man could only grimace and snort, turned to say goodbye and left in anger. The man turned around, bent his head low, and said to Cold Cloud that they were going back first. Cold Cloud looked at their backs as they left, pondering. Turning back to me, he asked me what I was doing out here, and angrily reminded me not to go out alone for a while. I was confused and didn't know what was going on. I just replied to him that I had cooked a hot pot and wanted to eat it together to make it more lively. So I asked him if he wanted to come and eat it. He was flattered by the news and was so excited that he thought we were going out for dinner. But he still said, "What's that? Can I eat it?" I heard him talk like this angry, turn around and leave. Love to come, not come. Listening to the back of his voice to stay. Did not turn back. He looked at my back and shouted that he wanted to eat hot pot. followed by pushing the door into the house. Looking at the scene in front of him, he was surprised to find a fire, very panicked, wanting to pull me to leave quickly, because they believe that fire is very dangerous. I rushed to tell him that I lit it. He was surprised to hear this and hid in fear outside the door. I reassured him that fire doesn't hurt anyone and that it can also make delicious food. Beckoning him to come inside, Bitey came back, holding some vegetables in his hands, and called out to me, "Tell me the meat is cooked. Come and eat it." Frosty Cloud looked at the two men in front of him fishing for meat in the pot to eat, shocked that Whitey was not afraid of fire. Think it must be in front of me to show off, deliberately pretend. He secretly decided that he cannot be afraid, sat down and found that there is nothing special. This meat is so fragrant, 1,000 times more flavorful than usual. Bitey gave me a bowl of it. I smelled it, smelled so good that I just couldn't help myself. I picked up a piece of meat and put it in my mouth, but because it had just come out of the pot, I accidentally burned my mouth. I cried out in pain. The man stared nervously, holding me up and urging me not to rush. What if it burns? Tears in my eyes. Whitey caressed my face with worry. He gently blew a breath. All of a sudden stuttered, nervously said nothing. Frost Clouds looked at the scene in front of me. Chopsticks on the meat fell off and did not know it, thinking that he also wanted to blow. It's really embarrassing. I violently cover my mouth and quickly change the topic of conversation. I asked him if they were from the Blackwater Wolves. He explained that Aki was the son of the Blackwater Wolf clan's leader, his cousin. The other was Ma Ching, the witch doctor of the Blackwater Wolf clan. They came to talk business with him, but it didn't occur to him that Livy was determined to follow, and he was annoyed to see her coming. I picked up a piece of meat and gently blew on it, asking what kind of business they wanted to talk about. When he didn't answer, he said, "You don't have to tell me if it's inconvenient." He didn't take it to heart, and didn't think he had anything to hide from me. Whitey stopped his chopsticks as he listened to their conversation and remained silent. I told them to wait and then turned around and went next door to get something. Then I took the bamboo tube and showed it to them. They explained that the water inside the bamboo tube was the water they wanted to sell, and I gently sniffed the bamboo tube. This smell. This is actually wine. Frosty Cloud was surprised that I actually knew about this kind of water. Seeing me nodding my head and explaining the uses and disadvantages of wine, I suddenly remembered that Yajo did not mention that wine should not be drunk too much. He did not know or deliberately conceal. He did this in the end. What intentions? Bitey asked why he couldn't drink more. So I explained that it's easy to get drunk, and when you're drunk you can easily lose control and even go crazy. For the sake of safety and insurance, it's still not recommended to drink too much. The two were shocked to hear that. This is very important. They remembered. I reminded Dao can inquire about what they use to make wine, excited to think that if they can grow food in the future, not only can they eat it, but they can also make wine to sell it. It's like a 1-2 punch. Frosty Cloud quickly agreed to it. I poured some wine into everyone's bowls and took a sip, happily raising my glass to celebrate tonight's hot pot. The two of them looked at me so happy, but didn't understand what it meant to say cheers. They were confused. The three of them raised their bowls together. Bitey tasted the wine in the bowl. The flavor was really shocking. Frosty Cloud took a sip. It felt a bit strange and a bit spicy, but it was quite good. Before we knew it, we were all having a good time. The three of them were happily mingling. I looked at the empty bamboo tube. I didn't realize that we had drunk all of it. Suddenly, I felt a strong gaze from behind me, and turned around to find that these two people were staring at me somberly. I don't know what's wrong with them. Frosty Cloud's face was red and he was already drunk, gently calling my name. Immediately the next second he violently shouted out loud. Startled me a bit. He shouted out loud, asking me to be his mate, telling me that he really liked me so much. When I heard this, I thought he might not be drunk, so I told him to stop talking nonsense and rushed him back to rest. But he refused and turned into a furry little gray wolf. He said he wanted to sleep with me. I was petrified, looking at Frosty in front of me like a big dog. I didn't know what to do, when White Emperor appeared behind him with a gust of cold air. When he heard that Frost Cloud wanted to be my mate, White Emperor slapped him out of the door and flew away. The White Emperor grabbed him by the back of his neck, and I was worried that he would get hurt if he dragged him around like that. The White Emperor's body emanated a black aura and said, "He has thick skin and flesh. It won't break. We have to send him back to his room." As I watched, Bitey dragged him all the way out. Snapped. Frosty Cloud was thrown on the straw. I covered my mouth and looked at him sadly. His heart is really big, actually already asleep. Behind me there was a soughing sound. White Emperor violently picked me up and said, "Go back to sleep." I was shocked and looked at him. His body is so hot, it will not be drunk. I hurriedly dissuaded him, told him to wait a moment. After putting me down, he tugged at the clothes on his body. I frowned at him, not knowing what was happening. He pushed me violently on the bed and I told him to sober up. Then he kissed me. Whitey had his hands on the bedpan. I was shocked and wanted to warn him not to do that. But then there was a loud bang, and the dress was accidentally torn. I looked at the dress in pain and frowned. Whitey seemed to have sobered up a bit and let out a slow breath to compliment me on how pretty I look. I told him his pupils were the best. They were blue, like the stars in the night sky, dazzling even without light, and like seawater, sparkling with light. I gazed at him tenderly, and he looked at me with affection. I looked at him in shock, wondering what he wanted to do. Whitey's eyes were in a trance. Then he turned Lin slowly over to the front. He was facing Lin. Lin was already kneeling on the bed with her back to him. Suddenly he realized something was wrong, seemed to feel the pain and screamed out. I let him be like this. Bai D was in the back. His face flushed and said, slowly, I like you. I looked at him in panic. I'll be torn apart. Don't. I'm scared. Whitey said he was so uncomfortable, pulling at Isa's shorts again. I cried out, naked to him. Whitey's eyes weren't right. Not the usual Whitey. Shit. He was drunk too. It was horrible. I couldn't get rid of him. I tried to wake him up. Wake up! But his eyes were lost. There was no way to wake him up. I only suffered pain. Frost Cloud's beast ears shrugged. He sat up, holding his forehead in pain, and heard someone whimpering. After slowing down, shocked, it was actually me who was crying. Frost Cloud swished and darted over, kicked the door open with a clang and nervously asked what was wrong with me. He violently transformed back to his original form, and in front of him appeared a man-high big gray wolf. He rushed at Bai D and tore at him violently, telling him to let go of me. Bai D came to his senses and didn't know what was happening. Frosty Cloud saw me fall to the ground in a state of disarray and called out to me nervously. I cried out in pain. He picked me up fiercely, saw that my face looked bad, comforted me and said don't be afraid, ready to take me to the witch doctor's side. Bai D looked at the scene in front of him. He was shocked. He couldn't believe that this was his doing. He just wanted to go over, but he was warned by Frosty Cloud fiercely, telling him to stay away. He fiercely questioned him. I was hurt so badly, he did not know it. Finished ready to take me away, so that he was left alone to clear his head. Frosty Cloud carried me away, leaving Bai D alone in the house. He slammed his fist on the table, holding his forehead. He guiltily questioned what stupid thing he had done. Outside the cave, snow was falling and the wind was blowing. Inside the house, Longju was cozy with a black mask on his face. The door was kicked open with a clang, and he heard someone shouting his name. He turned around and scolded. What are you doing in the middle of the night? Frosty Cloud said. I'm hurt. Let him take a look. I was carefully placed on the straw. Longju cursed me when he saw me hurt like this, but Xuanyin hurriedly explained that he didn't do it. Although I had already fainted, I was still sobbing in my sleep. Witch doctor looked at the injuries on my body, frowned hard. Hate voice asked, in the end, which bastard did it? Frost Cloud on the sidelines said it was the White Emperor did it. I did not expect that person has been mild and gentle. Actually, he did it. Too shocking. After looking at the injuries, he began to instruct Frosty Cloud to take out the herbs and mash them up. After some treatment, the blood finally stopped. Fortunately sent in time. The two of them stood at the side, looking down at me worriedly. After asking the witch doctor to take care of me, Xuanyin was ready to put me here for the time being and turned to leave. The witch doctor hurriedly asked him where he was going. He turned back to me with a grim face and said, to go back and teach that bastard a lesson. The White Emperor saw Frosty Cloud return and opened his mouth ready to inquire, but Frosty turned into his own body and jumped down and beat him. White Emperor asked him what he was going to do. He heard him say he wanted to beat him up and blamed him for bullying and hurting me. He lay on the ground in a state of distress and opened his mouth to explain that he didn't remember what happened just now, and that he could beat him up all he wanted. He just wanted to know if I was. Frost Cloud's pair of wolf eyes stared viciously at the. Finally he turned around and prepared to leave, and told him it was because of you that I was hurt so badly. Just don't want to know anything about me. In the end, Frost Cloud viciously left a comment that White Emperor is not qualified to have me as his female, piercing his heart. He covered his face in pain, regretting what he had done. Outside the cave, the snow is still whistling down. The cold pierces the bones. After several days, I opened my eyes and wondered where I was now. When I came to my senses, I found myself lying on the bed, feeling pain in my body. I violently recalled what Bai D had done. My face was ugly. I tugged at the quilt and shivered uncontrollably. Suddenly, I heard someone asking me how I was doing. I turned around and found that it was the witch doctor from Longzhou. The witch doctor came over with the soup and medicine, and after asking about my health, I answered him carefully. I looked at the black soup in front of me, which didn't smell good, and I didn't want to drink it. After the sound of clattering, it was Frosty Cloud, with a big bag in his mouth. He brought me a change of clothes. I remembered that all these clothes were made for me by D. I couldn't help crying. Frosty's face immediately tensed up, thinking I was crying because of the pain of my wounds. I could only rub my eyes to hide that it was because the medicine I just took was too bitter. Thinking of the time before I came here alone, met by D and lived like a family, but something like this happened. How should I face him in the future? A furry wolf head came over in front of me. Frost Cloud should be comforting me, right? I hugged his big head and he was wooing me to cheer me up. By D, with a wounded face, appeared outside the witch doctor's door, not daring to enter. The witch doctor saw him and asked him what he was doing here, but he only wanted to know if I was well, so he asked the witch doctor about my wound. Longzhou had to tell him that I had just woken up, so don't scare people. It would be troublesome if my wound disintegrated. He remembered what Frosty Cloud said to him that day and hated what he had done. He had something he wanted to ask the witch doctor to tell me. 5 days later, I told the witch doctor that I was really well and could go back. He had no choice but to leave me behind and bid him farewell. I thanked him for taking care of me all these days, and prepared to go to the White Emperor to tell him that I hadn't seen him all these days, and I couldn't hide from him any longer. When I arrived at the White Emperor's door, I pushed open the door, but I didn't see Bai Di. Called out his name. No one responded. I found the blanket replaced with a new one, and the cellar was full of vegetables and dried meat, but the man was gone. I stared at my lovely, dull eyes with mixed feelings and exclaimed that Bai Di was not at home, sitting in front of the pot, very angry. I thought to myself, fine, I'll just stay home and wait for Bai Di to come back, and in the meantime, I'll think about our future. My eyes were glowing as I thought, Bai Di is good to me. I have a good feeling about Bai Di. I want to be his mate and live the rest of our lives together in peace. Suddenly I frowned and thought of something terrible about him. I sat in front of the pot, staring at the rice in the pot, thinking, if I really can't solve it, maybe I can think of another idea. With a poof, I lit a match, thinking I'll just have to tell Whitey to find another mate. I lowered my head and my heart dropped to the bottom, thinking, we could be brother and sister, like family too. I shook my head frantically to get rid of my thoughts. No, it's too selfish to think like this. What to do? I'm so worried. The rice in the pot was cooked and gurgling. I've been waiting for the White Emperor for almost a day. He hasn't come back yet. It's going to be dark soon. Frosty Cloud swished through the door and asked me if I was feeling better. I answered him with a helpless smile on my face. Thank you, I'm much better. Do you know where White Emperor went? As soon as Frosty Cloud heard the name of that tiger, he bared his 4 fangs in great displeasure and shouted angrily, I don't know. I ignored Frosty Cloud's ranting behind me and turned my head to go find the Longzhou witch doctor. I thought to myself that the wind was howling, the snow was flying, the temperature was so low. Bai Di hadn't come back for the whole day. It was very dangerous. I was very worried about him. Frosty Cloud shouted, really? Let's go together. When I left the cave, I saw snowflakes flying outside, and it was white as the sky. I hurriedly asked Longzhou, do you know where Bai Di went? He pondered for a while and told me that the source-leaf fruit is a good tonic for females, and Whitey volunteered to help find it. I said, why is he so stupid? It's freezing outside. I have to find him. Frosty Cloud tugged on my arm, frowning tightly, and said to me, it's snowing so hard. If you go out now, you're sure to get frostbitten. He held my trembling hand and thought to himself, even though he was almost like that by Bai Di, his body was in pain and he was still worried about him. He frowned tightly and shouted at me. He helped me to find it and told me to be good and stay here. My eyes widened in surprise as I looked at him, thinking, why is he being so nice to me? Frosty Cloud looked back at me and told me that we were guests of the Rock Wolf Clan, and that as the leader of the Wolf Clan group, he surely couldn't see us die and save us. Longzhou witch doctor thought to himself, why didn't he know that Frost Cloud had such a strong sense of responsibility? I hurriedly called out to Frost Cloud and he stared back at me. I walked over and put the cloak on Frosty Cloud, raised my head and said to him, it's cold outside, take the fire with you as well. I looked at him with expectant eyes and said to him, if you really can't find Bai Di, you should come back. His voice suddenly turned red. He looked down at me and shouted, slowly, He told me firmly that if he could come back safely this time, he would make me promise him one thing. Longju witch doctor in the back. Happy all jumped up, thinking that the brat finally got the hang of it. My eyes were glowing, and I firmly said to him, as long as you can come back safely, no matter what, I promise you. I suddenly realized why I was a bit nervous. Outside, the wind was whistling and rattling the branches of the trees. The frosty clouds accompanied the wind and walked step by step on the snow with perseverance. I'm praying here that by D and Frosty Cloud must come back safely. Frosty Cloud was gone for 3 days, but the snow outside got heavier and the temperature got lower and lower. Every day I stood there staring at the snowflakes. The witch doctor came out and said, "Don't worry, they will come back." I blamed myself with tears in my eyes and said, "It's all my fault. If I hadn't given them alcohol, they wouldn't have lost control of their emotions." Dr. Longchuck advised me not to blame myself too much. I blamed myself with tears in my eyes. I was really stupid and useless. Frosty was right. They shouldn't have risked their lives for me. They shouldn't have risked their lives for me. Which Dr. Longju hurriedly explained. Don't misunderstand me. Frosty Cloud is always lying. He says he hates it, but in his heart, he wants to be my mate. He wants to mate with me. I don't understand him. Doesn't he hate females? I sat down slowly and heard Longju tell me why Frost Cloud hates females. Frost Cloud's mother used to be the best-looking female in the Wolf Clan and had many suitors. Frost Cloud's father was also one of them. He knew what his mate liked to eat and he was willing to find it for her. Unfortunately, he was bitten by a full-grown fire dragon bird. The female, however, thought Frost Cloud's father was too useless and abandoned him without a second thought, so she was so devastated that she died without surviving the attack. I couldn't understand why he gave up hope of living after being abandoned by the female. Seeing that I was puzzled, Longju said in detail, because each male orc can only have one female in his life. Therefore, a male who is abandoned by a female will suffer the repercussions of the mate contract, which is not a pain that anyone would want to endure. At first I thought that mates in this world were similar to marriages, but it turns out that the consequences of being abandoned are simply fatal. But the witch doctor followed that up by saying that wasn't the most painful. His father died and his body turned back to its original form, which was the most prized of all the mutant frost wolves. The female who abandoned him and tried to have his fur stripped from him. Undoubtedly it's something that causes a lot of pain. It's very cruel. This is the worst boy I've ever seen. His own cruel mother trying to get other males to skin off his father's fur. Luckily Frost Cloud arrived in time and tried desperately to stop it. He stood over his father's body and tore into anyone who came near. It wasn't until the body rotted that the mother had to give up her father's fur. A child watched his father's body rot in front of him. It was a huge blow to Frost Cloud's heart. From then on, he became very hateful to females. I sighed with tears in my eyes. I'd better be nice to him from now on. I won't fight with him on the pole. Someone shouted behind me, "Slow down, it's not good." The purple-haired boy rushed into the cave and hurriedly shouted, "Someone has stolen something from your house," I said with a panicked look on my face. "What?" After hearing this news, I ran out of the cave in a panic, facing the wind and snow, ignoring the people behind me to rush out. He came back to his senses and immediately came and called all the young males of the clan to help slow down the family. Longju witch doctor looked at the back of the purple-haired boy left and lamented, "Frost Clouds and White Emperor are not there. This can be a bit of a problem." He looked in amazement at the faintly glowing object in front of him and made a rustling sound. I pushed the door open violently shouting, "What are you doing in my house? Put down everything!" I cried out, weak and helpless, but they all ignored me. The sinister green-haired woman stared at me with her evil eyes. She said to me with a sinister look on her face, "Your males are gone anyway. You can't stop me." I said angrily, "They actually took advantage of my absence to run into my house to rob it. When Whitey comes back you will be dead." Before I could finish my sentence, the corner of Livy's mouth rose and she pointed her hand at me and said, "That's if they come back alive too." I was suddenly a pair of hands cupped chin, shocked to look at the person in front of me. She smiled evilly. If it wasn't for the fact that someone had their eye on me, she would have destroyed me. I violently brushed aside her hand and slammed my body into her, saying, "Get out of my way!" She was knocked to the ground by me and let out an ah. Livy thought to herself, "This wild female has made a fool of her 3 times. She can't stand it any longer. She's going to arrest me and teach me a lesson." Her friends looked at each other. All of them looked embarrassed and thought to themselves, "She's crazy to do that to a little girl. I'm sure they couldn't do that to a pretty, cute female like me." Li Wei was shocked and thought, "She is the most beautiful, but these males are even hesitant about me. She surely can't keep me." She shouted out, "Yachel, get your female out of here." Surprised and scared, I turned around to see Chewy. Aki smiled a sinister smile and looked down at me and said, "Poor little female, he'll take care of me." I gripped the stick and shouted, "I don't need your care and I won't go with you, so get out of here or I'll be rude." Yachel said grimly with a tight frown, "If I don't go with him I'll just starve to death." Li Wei said smugly, "All my food belongs to her anyway," advising me to go with Yakyu. I frowned hard thinking, the two of them are actually in cahoots. One robbing things and the other robbing people. The calculations are really loud. The two of them showed looks that made people sick to look at and said those disgusting dialogues. Bam! The wooden stick had hit the ground. I shouted in horror, "What are you going to do? Let go of me!" Yachel held my wrists hard and threatened me, telling me I'd better go with him. If I didn't, I'd suffer the consequences. I shouted in surprise, "No! Let go of me! Let go of me!" Lai Wei was at the back of the room, fanning the flames. Archer pressed me to the ground with brute force. I screamed in agony. And bitterness as he pulled me down, and I shouted, "Stop it, Shui!" I stared fiercely at him and shouted, "Yachel, have you thought about the consequences of this? I will abandon you. I will not let you go even if I die." I held on to my last glimmer of hope that he would be scornful of the consequences of reflecting on the mate contract. I watched as he slowly showed a hesitant expression and thought to myself, the repercussions of the mate contract are too vicious. He can't afford it. Li Wei shouted very grumpily, "What a useless waste. Don't hesitate," she said sinisterly, "pour me a large amount of potion and I won't resist." I looked embarrassed thinking, this time it's definitely over. I'm sure I'll be doused. Will it be the same as that night? I'm too scared. So much so that my body was trembling with fear. Yachel had a sinister look on her face as she laughed at me and stroked me while still saying those disgusting words. Li Wei smiled evilly and said to me, He, it's right to be afraid. There will be something I'm even more afraid of in a while." Her pupils dilated and she stared at the spot. Suddenly, with a thud, she spat out blood. Not knowing what happened, she fell heavily to the ground, letting out a scream. She stood up shakily, clutching her stomach. With tears in her eyes, she said harshly, "Who kicked her? Stand out for her." There was a sound of footsteps and everyone looked at the door. Frosty Cloud stared at all the people in the room with a cruel look and said through gritted teeth, "It's him.